Welcome to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. As always, callers to the show will need to take a position, be able to defend it with an argument that is factual, not emotional. And if you can't make your point without insulting someone, you can't make your point on this show. Callers and guests will be treated with complete respect. For my part, I will ask questions that matter and give people the opportunity to answer. My website is www.youdefendit.com. That's youdefendit.com. You can give me your comments on the show anytime. By Friday of each week, I will have the topics up for the next week's show. You can also visit my blog through the site, and you can read my posts and leave your own. Okay, the lineup for tomorrow's talk shows. ABC's This Week will have President-elect Barack Obama. CBS Face the Nation will have former Illinois Attorney General and Senate appointee Roland Burris. Also Representative John Boehner, Republican from Ohio, and Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat, Illinois. NBC's Meet the Press will have Bill Cosby, author Alvin Poussant, Representative Maxine Waters, Democrat, California, and District of Columbia Mayor Adrian Fenty, and former Michigan Representative David Bonnier. CNN's Late Edition will have Vice President Dick Cheney and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, probably not together. You can imagine what that would look like. And Fox News Sunday will have President Bush and former President George H.W. Bush. All right. This week, I want to talk about incentives. And I mean that in the broadest possible sense. I want to talk about incentives as they apply to domestic policy and foreign policy and football. Because I think there have been some football coaches fired recently, and that the way that these articles are written and the reasons given for their firing, I think tells us a lot about how we think as Americans, and how I think that needs to change in some respects. I don't have much to read today, very few notes. I want to go a little deeper than that today. I want to meet my listeners at a level that we can all relate to. And I think that this issue of incentives and how they work in our lives and how we perceive our role in our government and our role in our society and what motivates us to do things as opposed to what should, I think is an issue that really is at the foundation of all the problems this country faces and all the challenges we face internationally. So I want to get to that. I want to read two very brief articles. The first is from ESPN.com, October 14, 2008. Bowden out at Clemson. Coach deserved fate, QB says. And here's the article. Part of the article. Clemson ousted football coach Tommy Bowden on Monday, 4 days after the Tigers, who were the favorites to win the ACC championship, lost to Wake Forest and fell to 3-3. Clemson's season started with a big thud, a 24-point loss to then number 24 Alabama that senior quarterback Cullen Harper said really hurt our confidence. Harper, who was benched after the Tigers lost to Wake Forest and replaced by highly regarded sophomore Willie Korn, said the program needed to cut ties with Bowden. It's what he deserved, Harper said, explaining later that Bowden tried to motivate us, but guys were off the bandwagon. The second article I want to read, which will seem completely disconnected, but is not, is from the Examiner.com from yesterday. The Guardian reports that the still incoming Obama will abandon the isolation of Hamas, considered a terrorist organization by Israel. The U.S. and the European Union, the U.S. and the European Union, and is prepared to talk to Hamas. That's the entire portion of that article that I want to read. So Obama is willing to talk to Hamas, who is right now at war with Israel. And you have Tommy Bowden, fired from Clemson a few months ago because he couldn't motivate his players, according to the players, or at least their leader, at the time, the quarterback. And my question is, what do these, and this may be your question, what do these stories have to do with each other? And my answer is everything. The problems we face in this country, the things we have to deal with, the challenges internationally, it all boils down to motivation. And not just your ability to motivate someone else, but your ability to determine what the incentives are that will motivate other people, and, perhaps as importantly, your ability to motivate yourself. I believe that the key to success in domestic policy is to properly motivate the public. They have to buy in. But there's two sides to that. The way you motivate the public, I believe, is just simply being honest with them. Not necessarily telling them that you're going to solve their problems, but telling them, because it's true, that they're going to have to help. Telling them that if our discipline doesn't change, our place in the world will. And it needs to start with self-respect. It needs to start with the individuals. We have developed over time this idea that we are entitled to be motivated. And if somebody doesn't motivate us to do something, and we don't do it, it's not really our fault. We were not properly motivated to do it. After 9/11, we were told to shop. That was a disastrous decision, in my view. That should have been a time, because certainly the events of September 11th caught the attention of the American public. We could have rallied and changed a lot of things that needed to be changed. Dependence on foreign oil, which basically, for the last 7-8 years, we have been funding both sides of the war on terror. We didn't do it because we were let off the hook. We were told, don't worry, government will take care of it. You just go on shopping. Live your lives. That's an actual phrase from the administration. The best way to assist in the war on terror is to live your lives. Wrong. The best way at that time to have contributed to the war on terror was to change your lives. But that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because we weren't asked to. But what I'm trying to do is get beneath and beyond that. Do we have to be asked to do it? We know what needs to be done. We don't do it. And the reason we don't do it, we claim, is because nobody asked us to. Bob from Binghamton on line 1, you there?
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, how are you?
Well, great, I guess. Did you used to live in Port Dick as a youngster?
I did not.
Okay, well, to get to the topic, the incentives. To me, and I'll put a little different spin on it, I've wondered for, maybe more than 9/11 even, that, I was trying to be the policeman of the world. And, I look back to Rome, my history with the Roman Empire and what they did of ruling the world. And, of course, England later did it for a while. But anyway, Rome got to be so that their leaders got corrupt, and a lot of the public and the leaders were wine, women, and song. I'm sure you've heard that before. And I wonder if our government isn't going down that same path, that it's only so long that these horrendous deficits that we've been building up in the economics courses that I took in college, and then they show why the positive side of it, stimulates blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it's always been that our economy was almost like gold, so people didn't mind having dollars. But then when dollars got to be worthless,
right,
with the price of oil going up, and they didn't want oil to be in dollars, because it would be like chicken feathers or manure or something was, determining the price of oil, and that's one reason I'm sure you know why it went up so high.
And China this past week
Yep.
announced that it's going to be buying up less of American debt.
Right.
Because it's not worth as much to them anymore.
Absolutely.
Once you hit $11 trillion, our debt load is unsustainable, and they know that too.
And like you said before, that we're both sides of the war with the petrodollars.
And thanks very much for calling.
Sure, thank you.
And that's because we refused, at the time, to make sacrifices. We could have made sacrifices. We didn't. And we should have. And we're in danger of doing that again. Gas is now $1.70, $1.80 a gallon. So the urgency is gone. And nobody's motivating us to change our behavior. We should demand the change in behavior because we know what's right. I'm running a little long right now. I want to come back after the break and talk more about this. I found that Mike Shanahan, coach of the Denver Broncos, was fired for not motivating his team. He's won 2 Super Bowls. Eric Mangini, coach of the Jets, fired. They didn't get in the playoffs. Some said he wasn't able to motivate his players. It's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. I want to talk about it a little more when I get back. But it's about football, but it's not about football. It's about us. We'll be back. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number is 772-1290. We left off talking about incentives and motivation. I want to talk some more about football. Mike Shanahan, coach of the Denver Broncos, he's won 2 Super Bowls. He was fired because they lost 3 games at the end of the season. And some said he was not able to properly motivate his players. I talked earlier in the show about this quarterback at Clemson after Tommy Bowden was fired there. This Cullen Harper. I submit that Cullen Harper's future is dim. Cullen Harper said, "It's what he deserved," referring to the firing. He tried to motivate us, but guys were off the bandwagon. If you are the quarterback of a Division I college football team, and you're looking to anybody else in the world to motivate you, then you're doomed. You're nothing. You don't belong in that league. And this happens all the time. Coaches are fired all the time because they can't motivate their players. Why on earth do players need to be motivated? I have never understood it. What about self-respect? Games like football, you're matched up with somebody across from you. What about the desire to win? Somebody has to remind you to have it on a weekly basis. It's a mindset. We have motivational speakers. There are hundreds or thousands of them who make millions and billions of dollars, I'm sure, in total, telling us to do what we already know. Succeed. Everybody knows how to succeed. You work at it. I've never met somebody who worked hard and didn't succeed. A football player, any football player. College, you're looking at 4 years, maybe 3 if you turn pro, maybe 5 if you're a redshirted freshman, whatever. a finite period of time. Whatever happened to playing your hardest every down because that's how you define yourself? Can it really depend on somebody else to tell you how to be? What's the point? What kind of person are you if your day-to-day, play-to-play performance depends on somebody else telling you to play hard? And that is the mindset, I think, that Americans have been lulled into. You know, we thirst for leadership. What is leadership? Why is so much of leadership about motivating people to do certain things that they know they should do anyway? There is no reason why an athlete, particularly at the professional level, your reputation, your self-respect, your identity in the public's mind are defined by your play. If that's not enough, then you don't belong there. You don't need a coach. You don't need a president to tell you to do what you already know you should be doing. And it is no excuse not to do what you should be doing that nobody told you to do it. We talked about New York's budget. And what is happening right now is that every special interest group is lining up to criticize Governor Patterson's budget, all waiting to see how it turns out. What should be happening is something like what I called a sacrifice summit, where all of these groups get together without the government and decide how to close the $15 billion gap, and then present that to the governor. And why don't they do that? Because nobody's making them. Collectively, apparently, they haven't thought of it. There's no incentive to do it, because we have yet to have a governor in the last 20 years impose any kind of punishment for not doing it. We have yet to have a governor who makes the public buy in. And the way you do that is you be honest with them. You say, and so far, in my opinion, Governor Patterson is doing that. He's saying there's going to be pain associated with this. This is not a problem that came to us yesterday. This is a problem that has been building for years. We now have a $15 billion deficit. Everybody's going to hurt to make this thing right. What could possibly be wrong with that? And the reaction from all the groups involved is, well, I'm not going to be hurt. I don't mind if somebody else is. I'm not going to be hurt. How do I get it so that I'm not hurt? The answer is, you don't. And everybody under the sun has a compelling argument for why their special interests should be protected. I remember when Cuomo was governor, and things were getting worse all the time. And I was actually watching a speech of his with my father. And I said to my father, how can you take issue with this guy? Listen to him. He's explaining everything perfectly. And my father said to me, if he's so right about everything, then how can everything be so bad? Had no answer to that. Everybody's got to pitch in. Everybody's got to stop looking to the government to motivate them to do what they already know they need to do. I mean, this is, as I said last week, this is a mathematical issue. It's not a moral issue. There's only so much money. That's it. There isn't enough to pay for what everybody wants. That being the case, everybody isn't going to get what they want. And that takes us to a pretty simple place. How much is everybody going to concede in order to make it work? So far, everybody's individual answer has been nothing. That's unsustainable. That is also the mindset nationally that we are seeing. We have a massive economic problem. Nobody wants to hurt to fix it. Well, there's going to be pain to fix it. Paul Harvey is up next from 8:30 to 8:35. And we will be back right after him. You are listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer right here on News Radio 1290 WMBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. Phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. We left off talking about football and motivation and incentives. And I wanted to take that theme to the broader issue of foreign policy. Right now, Barack Obama is indicating, or people within his circle are indicating, that he is willing to talk to Hamas. Now, the reaction from some has been, how could you? They're a terrorist organization. He's going to do it anyway. Now, if you take the morality out of this, if you take the talk of terrorists and terrorism out of this, right now you have Hamas, who is receiving almost no support from the Arab world, which is extremely unusual for a situation like this. Earlier in the week, Hezbollah in Lebanon, or somebody in Lebanon, fired a rocket or two into Israel and were quickly condemned. Hamas is isolated right now. Not only is the Arab world not supporting them for these rockets they're firing into civilian neighborhoods in Israel, Israel is pounding them on a daily basis. Now is the time to talk to Hamas. This notion that you're just going to kill them all is ludicrous. You're not going to. By stating that you're going to kill them all, you are going to increase recruitment. And you won't know when you've killed them all. It's not like they're on a list. You have to determine what it is that Hamas wants. Some would say they want to kill Israelis. That is not what they want. That's what they do to get what they want, as despicable as it is. But when it comes to foreign policy, everybody kills people to get what they want and justifies it. The way out of this is to find out what they want, see if there is an agreement that can be reached that promotes American interests. That's what our foreign policy should be about. We killed 100,000 Iraqis. Civilians. In pursuit of something noble. That's foreign policy. That's how it works. Our foreign policy should be based upon our incentives, what's best for us, and determining what motivates the people we're dealing with, what they want. And to the extent those two things can be brought into line, that should be our foreign policy with respect to that country. I don't care what country it is, whether it's Cuba, whether it's North Korea, Iran, whatever. Setting up showdowns is not going to advance American interests. It doesn't work. This notion that we are punishing people by not letting them talk to us, it's a joke. It's ridiculous. Not only on a human level is it just something that most of the planet regards as utter arrogance, but it doesn't work. We identified Iran, Iraq, North Korea as this so-called axis of evil. Didn't talk with any of them. Iran, North Korea now are much further along with nuclear weapons than they were in 2001. That policy has been an abject failure. We are less safe now with respect to those two countries than we were before. Iraq could devote an entire show to that. It's the only country that didn't have weapons, and we invaded them. And we did it because of this morality, because we were going to be bringing freedom to the world. Freedom was going to be on the... It's all nonsense. As I said last week, the biggest blunder in the Iraq War was not going in. It was changing the rationale once we got there to something that is completely and utterly unsustainable and hypocritical. We have no intention of bringing democracy to the Middle East. None. It's not like we're going to be invading Saudi Arabia in the near future. Perhaps the least democratic country in the Middle East. We have a royal ruling family that has been in charge for decades. Their justice is Shia law. They behead people in public. They cut off hands and feet. We're not bringing democracy to the Middle East. We should be doing for America what is best for America, and that's it. And it involves identifying incentives. It involves determining what people want and how to give it to them in a way that promotes our interests. That's what foreign policy is. And you can't figure that out unless you talk with people. And it doesn't have to be a varsity-sized photo op. You do it discreetly, but you do it. We talked about Pakistan. We ruined our chances to capture or kill bin Laden because we put the leaders of those countries in an impossible position. The population of Pakistan, the citizens in Pakistan despise the United States. At least a large segment does. You make it impossible for the government to openly work with you. All of our efforts with respect to bin Laden should have been done discreetly. You work with him quietly in a way where everybody's happy. With respect to the domestic situation, we're going to have a budget. Barack Obama is going to propose something on the 20th. He's proposing it to some extent now. And the question is the public going to buy in? And I submit that it starts with the public being willing to. You can't sit there and watch the inaugural speech and say, it better be enough to motivate me. You can't watch the State of the Union, which has become a 1 hour fiasco in my mind. It's a pep rally. It doesn't. When is the President of the United States going to stand up there and say the state of our union is in dire need of fixing? The state of our union is weak, and here's why. We've had no fiscal discipline. We have an unsustainable foreign policy that we can't apply evenly from one country to the next. That's what we need. Frank, you there?
Hi there, Rob.
Morning.
Hi. I'm not sure that I quite understand what you're saying with your quarterback analogy. Let's take the energy problem.
Okay.
The individual can do very little about it except to use less. I'm not going to do much about it unless I strike oil in my backyard and then build a $1 billion refinery in secret because of all the government restrictions to produce gas. I think it's the president's job to call in experts. The key word is experts, not tree huggers, to look at the problem and then come up with a long-range plan to get us there.
Well, what I think is that we already know what we need to do.
I don't think so.
And we drove how many million or billion fewer miles when the price of gas was high.
Right.
But now we're returning to levels that we drove at before, even though we know that isn't going to do anything to decrease our long-term dependence on foreign oil. And we're waiting as we were after September 11th. I think we would have done, to some extent, there's no question that the president plays a role. But the role has to be something more than proposing solutions. The role has to be, here's what I'm laying out as a plan, and you're going to help. That's
fine. The trouble is, we never get the plan. Look at this tremendous non-corn ethanol.
Oh, I agree with you on that.
This is really stupid. It affected the feed for the
right.
hogs. It affected the cost of corn, which goes into almost everything you buy into the store.
It made life more expensive.
It's really dumb. And what he needs to do is come up with a plan. Say, hey, look, we need nuclear, oil, non-corn ethanol, and all these other things, which are like 1%, solar, wind power, and so on and so forth. And then present a plan to get us to, say, controlled fusion in 50 years, which gives us infinite energy. And nobody's done that. It is really dumb.
I agree. What I'm saying is the president, we keep looking for the president to tell us what to do. And my point, I guess, is twofold. Number one, we already know what to do. And secondly, we need a president that says, now do it.
Well,
and that's part of the long-term plan of this country, is that there has to be some shared sacrifice. It cannot keep going the way it's going.
I agree with the shared sacrifice, but I don't think we know what to do. That's the problem. I don't think the president knows what to do. Hey, let me say one thing. This is the new year. I want to give you a pat on the back, okay? I think yours is one of the very few talk shows out there that deals with heavy-duty topics in a serious way, and I can only think of one other one. So you're doing a good job. I hope you're on the radio for a long time.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I should just leave it there. My point is that we need to stop going forward with a mindset that says, tell me what to do. We need a mindset that starts with, I've learned certain things already in my life. I'm going to keep doing those. I'll drive less if I have to. I'll be willing, even if you don't want to drive less. I got more than one car. I'll pay more. I'm willing to pay more. If, across the country, that will result in fewer miles being driven. I'll do that. I will have an open mind when it comes to alternative forms of energy. I remember the 9-mile nuclear accident. But it seems to me that nuclear power, there are very few accidents with it. Now, the obvious argument there is it only takes one nuclear accident to ruin your whole day, and I understand that. But it only takes one nuclear weapon in the hands of terrorists to ruin your whole day also, and we're giving them the money to do it. We need to feel as a country, we need to decide for ourselves that we have a responsibility to help solve the problem. We cannot simply react to what the government tells us. We need to tell our representatives what we want them to do, what we're willing to do. Polls in this country, if the American public really understands the gravity of the economic disaster we have created for ourselves, of the foreign policy mess we're in, polls would reflect that, and they don't. Polls would reflect a country willing to sacrifice for a period of time, a short period of time in this context, which may be 5 years, to get us competitive again, to get us away from this perilous position we're in. We're running out of money. When you run out of money, you run out of influence. We'll be back. You're listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer on News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call in is 772-1290. I mentioned earlier that the reason I think Hamas is vulnerable to at least an agreement right now, at least a ceasefire, is because the Arab world is not out there supporting it like it usually does. Why is that? And this gets back to incentives. Why is the Arab, where are they? Where is the Arab outrage over this? Israel is doing what Israel does, which is aggressively protecting itself. There's nothing shocking or new about what's going on with Israel right now. It happened as recently as 3 years ago, a similar type of engagement with Israel. It's happened in 4 major wars since 1948. Where's the Arab outrage? My answer is, I don't know. But I can also tell you this. There's a reason, whatever it is. And it seems to be almost across the board, something they understand. There's an incentive for them this time not to. Perhaps it's because oil is so low right now. They don't have any leverage. In the 70s, I believe it was the Yom Kippur War, when America assisted Israelis. That was 72 or 73. That's when we saw the gas crisis in this country. The Arab world got angry and cut us off for a little while. But if you look at this, if it is because the lower price of oil has resulted in a loss of leverage by the Arab world, look what not just the slowing economy, but the American reduction, the decision to use less, to drive less. Look where that put us. Look at that just small example and the unintended but positive consequences it has when we take it upon ourselves to solve our own problems. Gas cost too much, people drove less. And not just in proportion to the increase in price. Because as gas prices lowered, the amount of driving didn't come back proportionally. We're driving more than we were when gas was at $4 a gallon, but not as much as we were when it was at $1.20 or $1.50 last time. just that may very well be responsible, at least in part, for preventing what could be a much wider conflict in the Middle East. There is certainly a global economic downturn that is affecting this. But I think it underscores my point about incentives. Saudi Arabia is in no position right now. OPEC is in no position to dictate anything to us because they have a product that's worth half of what it was worth less than a year ago. There isn't, it would appear that the, at least from the OPEC standpoint, the solidarity with their Arab brethren in Hamas is subordinate to their financial interests. No shock there. And when I say that, I mean in general. I mean that as a uniquely Arab viewpoint. I mean it's mankind when it comes to money. But wouldn't it be amazing if, by that simple act of discipline, of driving less, we were able to play a role, however small, in keeping this conflict between Hamas and Israel isolated and limited to Hamas and Israel? Just because we have denied other likely participants the leverage they would need to get in. You know, people who are getting $700 billion a year of our money, they budget as if they're getting $700 billion a year. When that gets cut in half, they got new problems. They're no different than we are. We budget as if we've got a surplus. Unfortunately, we govern with a deficit. It works when we show discipline, when we have enough self-respect to say, I don't need the government. The government didn't tell Americans to drive less. They did it on their own. They got angry. They knew they were being exploited. And they said, no. And these are the consequences of that. Possibly. I think yes, by the way. And that's how it works. It would not take a long time to work this country into a mindset of sacrifice if, number one, we had a president who called for it, and number two, we had a public who was willing to do it anyway. We've seen with respect to driving that the public is willing to do it. It remains to be seen how much else we are willing to do or not do to right the ship. We don't need to be the world's policeman anymore. And we need to get our house in order financially. And clearly, a component of that will be spending less. It just has to be. It is an unsustainable burden going forward. And another part of it might be higher taxes. But that seems to have become the third rail over the years, higher taxes. People think they're entitled to low taxes without any deference to or recognition of the amount of money we owe. Those things are irreconcilable. Thank you for listening to You Defend It. Please visit my website, www.youdefendit.com. Give me your comments, and I will see you next week.